I was under my kitchen sink replacing a faucet washer on a Saturday morning when I heard it. Not a crash, not a shout, just a single dull thud that came through the shared wall like a heavy book dropping in a quiet room. Then nothing. That kind of nothing bothers me more than noise does. I finished tightening the fitting, dried my hands on a rag, and told myself it wasn't my business. My neighbor was a woman named Cora Marsh. Somewhere around 50, maybe a little past it, with short silver-streaked hair and the kind of posture that came from decades of not asking anyone for anything. Her husband, Tom, had died 8 months before this. Not slow, not expected. One morning he was drinking coffee at their counter and by noon he was gone. I knew this because my neighbor on the other side, Paula, had told me in the driveway the following week while her dog tried to eat my shoelaces. I had not known Tom well. We had waved across the fence line for 6 years. Decent man from what I could tell. Kept a clean truck, mowed his own lawn, shouted something about a football game once from his side of the yard. That was all of it. Cora I knew even less. She was polite the way people are when they genuinely don't want anything from you. Morning wave. Brief nod at the mailbox. If we ended up at the curb at the same time, she would say something about the weather and then go inside before it turned into a real conversation. After Tom died, the waves stopped. The mail started sitting in the box for 2 days at a stretch. The lawn went a little longer than it ever had before. I noticed these things the way you notice something slightly off without being able to name what's wrong with it exactly. Then the thud came through the wall. I waited 5 minutes. When I heard nothing else, I walked next door and knocked. She answered in a house coat with paint on the sleeve, which surprised me. One hand was wrapped loosely in a dish towel that had a reddish smear across it. "Everything okay?" I asked. She looked at her hand, then at me, then at the door like she was considering closing it. "I was trying to fix the curtain rod in the bedroom," she said. "The wall bracket let go. I caught the edge of the window latch on my way down." "Down?" She gave me a flat look. "I was on the step stool." I nodded. "Let me see it." She didn't argue the way I expected. She just unwrapped the towel. It was a shallow cut, nothing that needed stitches, but deep enough to sting for a week if she left it alone. She had a first aid kit under the bathroom sink that still had Tom's name written on a piece of masking tape on the side of it. I didn't mention that. I put 2 butterfly strips across the cut, wrapped it in gauze, and went to fix the curtain rod. She did not thank me in the big careful way people do when they want you to know how much they mean it. She just said, "I'll make coffee," and walked to the kitchen. That was how it started. Not with some moment you could point to and say that was the thing. Just a loose bracket, a cut hand, and 2 people at a table who had lived 15 feet apart for 6 years without ever properly talking. Cora was sharper than I had given her credit for, which made me feel dumb for not noticing sooner. She had opinions about the city council's road maintenance budget that were specific and correct. She knew more about native plants than anyone I had ever met in a casual setting. And she made the best cup of coffee I had tasted since my mother stopped making it. We talked for almost 40 minutes that morning. Then she stood, rinsed the cups, and said she had errands. No big declaration. No lingering at the door. I walked home and spent the rest of the day replacing rotted trim on my back porch, not thinking about much. A week later, she knocked on mine. She was holding a printed sheet covered in boxes and had an expression I recognized from watching my own father stare at tax forms. Confused, annoyed at being confused, and not willing to admit either one. "My son set up something on my computer," she said. "I need to pay a bill and it keeps asking me to verify something I can't figure out." I said, "Show me." Took 8 minutes. The verification was a code sent to her phone that she hadn't realized was a text message. Once she understood what it was looking for, she finished the rest herself. That mattered to her. I could tell by the way she held the mouse after I stepped back. She didn't want to be walked through things. She wanted to understand them. "You didn't need to come over for something that simple," she said, meaning it as a compliment. "It wasn't anything. Most people make me feel stupid when I ask for help with technology. Most people like feeling useful more than they like being helpful. Different thing." She thought about that for a second, then nodded. Fair. After that, the visits got more regular without either of us planning them that way. Not every day. Nothing scheduled. But when her garage door spring snapped and she couldn't lift the door by hand, she texted me. When I found a paper bag of zucchini from her garden on my porch step with a strip of masking tape that said too much, I texted back that it was appreciated. Small exchanges. Nothing that felt like anything, which is the way most things that turn into something always start. I want to be clear about where I was at the time, because the story only makes sense if you understand what I brought to it. I was not pining for my neighbor. I was not doing these things because I had some private plan or some feeling I was trying to dress up as something else. I was doing them because she was alone, and some work is heavy for one person, and I had 2 working hands and not enough to fill them with most evenings. My own situation wasn't complicated. I'd been divorced 4 years from a woman named Karen, who had moved to Denver, remarried, and seemed genuinely happy now, which I was glad about without any performance in it. I had a project management job for a mid-sized contractor, a house I owned outright because I'd never liked carrying debt, and a life that was functional in every measurable way and empty in the ways that are hard to explain to someone who hasn't felt it yet. I'm saying all of this so you know what I walked into the situation carrying and what I didn't. The complicated part started in October. Cora's son Marcus showed up on a Tuesday. I saw the rental car in her driveway when I got home. He was inside for about 2 hours, then left. That evening, Cora came to my door with a foil-covered plate and set it on my counter without asking. "I made too much," she said. I looked at the foil. "Marcus leave already?" She sat down at my kitchen table, which she had only done once before. "He wants me to move." I didn't say anything right away. I started making tea because I didn't know what to do with the pause. "He found one of those apartment communities," she said. "Independent living. That is what they're calling it. Independent living. For people who supposedly can't manage their own houses." "Can you manage your own house?" She looked at me. "I have been managing it for 8 months." "Then you already answered the question." She pressed her lips together. "He thinks I am lonely. Are you?" The question sat between us for a moment. "That is not the same as being incapable," she said. "No," I said. "It isn't." She smoothed the edge of her sleeve against her arm. "He means well. I know that. He's 400 miles away and scared, and that makes everything harder to reason through. I understand all of it. But he's talking about selling the house." That landed with a weight that surprised me. Not because it involved me, because of what that house still held. 30 years of a life built in it. Tom's workshop off the garage still arranged the way he'd left it. Her garden that she'd spent a decade getting right. "What does Marcus need to see?" I asked. She looked at me. "To stop worrying. What does he need to see from you to believe the decision is yours and it's solid?" She thought about it. "He needs to see a plan. Not just that things are fine right now. That I've thought past right now. Okay, let's figure out what that looks like." That was how the second part of it began. We spent the next 3 Saturday mornings at her kitchen table working through what she actually needed to manage the property long term. Not what Marcus assumed she needed. What she genuinely needed. A reliable plumber. An electrician who wouldn't overcharge a woman calling on her own. A second person who could check in if she went silent too long. A clear picture of what the house required over the next 2 years and a realistic cost for each item on the list. She took notes in a small green notebook with a mechanical pencil. Real notes, not just a packet to show her son. She was building something for herself, and it showed in the way she stopped asking me for opinions on things she had already decided. Drop a comment below. Do you think what I was doing here was genuinely helping? Or just making it easier to keep showing up? I asked myself the same thing more than once. Marcus came back in November. Cora had me over for dinner that Friday, which was the first time she'd done that. She made a chicken dish so good I actually stopped talking midway through the first bite. She noticed and laughed. Marcus was a good man. I decided that quickly. He was careful with his mother, direct without being cold, and smart enough to be watching me all evening without making it obvious. After dinner, while Cora was in the kitchen, He came and stood in the doorway with his hands in his pockets. "You've been around a lot," he said. "Some." "Since when?" "Since a curtain rod came down in August." He was quiet a moment. "She seems more settled than she was in the summer." "She was always settled," I said. "She just needed someone helping her hold the weight while she figured out what the new shape of it was." He looked at me a little longer. Then he nodded slowly and went back to the living room. That was the whole conversation. But something shifted after it. He stopped pushing on the apartment community. He started calling her 3 times a week instead of once. That was his way of adjusting. I respected it. What I had not seen coming was December. There is nothing dramatic about the way these things happen. There never is in the version that is actually true. We had gone out together to get a few things. A new porch light she had been putting off. A bag of birdseed for the feeder Tom had built years ago. Coffee because she was running low. On the drive back, snow started coming down. Not hard. The early kind that makes everything look softened and slow. She was watching the road when she said, quietly, "I used to hate this drive in winter." "Why?" "Tom drove everywhere in bad weather. Said I got tense at the wheel in snow." She watched a flake hit the windshield and dissolve. "I got tense because he was a bad passenger." I laughed. She smiled, but there was something underneath it. "You miss him," I said. Not a question. "Every day," she said. Simple, no performance in it. But not the same way as the beginning. In the beginning it was like something had been removed. Now it is more like a scar that aches in cold weather. You know it is there. You learn its shape. I did not say anything to that. It deserved to sit without comment. She looked at me. "Does that sound terrible?" "It sounds true," I said. She turned back to the windshield. "You're easier to talk to than most people," she said. "You don't try to fix things that aren't broken." "Some things aren't broken." She looked at me again then, a beat longer than usual. In the car with snow coming down and the heater running and the road empty in both directions, something between us shifted. Neither of us put words to it, but we both knew it had happened. Neither of us mentioned it when we got back. She took her bags inside. I kept the porch light in my truck to install in the morning. We said good night the same as always. But I lay awake longer than I should have that night. The real complicated part arrived in January. Her sister Diane came to visit. I had not known Cora had a sister until she mentioned it the week before, and I knew nothing about Diane until Diane knocked on my door on a Thursday evening with a wine bottle in one hand and an expression that told me she had made up her mind about something before I said a single word. "So you're the neighbor," she said. I said I was. She walked in without being invited, set the wine on my table, looked around the front room, and turned to face me. She was shorter than Cora, louder in everything, and had a kind of directness that probably landed differently at a dinner party than it did in a stranger's front room at 7:30. "Cora talks about you more than she realizes," Diane said. I didn't respond to that. "I came to see what kind of man you are." "You could have asked Cora." "I'm asking you. What do you want from her?" There it was. I had been circling that question for months without naming it. And now this woman I had never met was standing in my living room demanding I say it out loud. I told her the truth as I understood it at the time. I said I had not started any of this with a plan. I said I had seen a woman working through a hard year alone and had helped where I could because stopping felt worse than staying useful. I said I respected Cora more than most people I had met in my life, and that I was not confused about the difference between respecting someone and wanting something from them. Diane looked at me for a long moment. "She is still in love with Tom," she said. "I know that. You're not bothered by that? Feeling like you're in some kind of competition you can't win. You can't compete with someone's whole life," I said. "And I'm not trying to. That's not what this is." Diane uncrossed her arms. Her expression didn't soften exactly, but it changed shape. "What is it then?" she asked. I looked toward the window. The street outside was dark and still. I thought about Saturday mornings at her table. The green notebook with real notes in it. The way she would say something dry and then immediately cover it because she wasn't used to letting people hear it. The way she held a coffee mug with both hands. I don't know yet, I said. But it's something I'm not going to rush. Diane looked at the wine bottle and then at me. Open that, she said. I'll find glasses. She walked to my cabinet like she already knew where things were, opened the wrong door twice, and then a third wrong door before she found them. It was so absurd that I laughed. And I think that was actually the answer she needed more than anything I had said. She stayed 2 hours. By the time she left, I knew more about Cora's life before I knew her than in all the months prior. I also understood that Diane wasn't an obstacle. She was a test. The fact that she left differently than she arrived meant something. The next morning, Cora knocked with an expression. Diane told me she came over. She did. I'm sorry. She doesn't believe in being indirect. She loves you. Cora folded her arms. What did she say to you? She wanted to know what kind of man I was. And what did you tell her? I held the door a little wider. You want coffee while you ask me that? Or are we doing this on the porch in January? She came in. I made coffee. She sat at my table and looked at her mug for a moment before she looked at me. I know what Diane was doing, she said. She thinks I have been filling up my time with projects and plans since Tom died, so I don't have to look at what I actually want. Is she wrong? Cora looked at me, not quickly, slowly, like she was deciding how honest she was going to be right now. No, she said. I sat across from her. Outside, someone's car started and drove away, and then the street was quiet again. I don't know what I am doing, she said. I want to say something plainly, but I don't know what plainly even looks like right now. You have been here every time I needed someone, and I have started needing someone in ways that have nothing to do with curtain rods and computer logins. And that frightens me because it feels like moving. I haven't moved in 8 months, and I'm afraid if I move too fast I'll lose the ground I found. I let her finish. That's a fair thing to say, I said. You're not going to tell me what you want? I want to keep showing up, I said. That's all I can offer right now. Not some plan. Not a speech. Just that I keep showing up and we take whatever this is at the speed that's honest. Her mouth softened. Not a full smile but close to one. That is the least romantic thing anyone has ever said to me, she said. You want me to try again? Don't you dare. I laughed and she did too. The real kind that fills up a kitchen and hangs in the air for a second after it's gone. After that, things didn't transform overnight. That would be a lie, and I think you understand by now that this story isn't built on those. We kept our separate houses. We kept our routines. But some things changed shape quietly. She stopped saying, I'll let you get back to it when we talk too long. I stopped needing a reason to knock. We started making dinner together on Friday evenings. Nothing formal, just two people who both had to eat and preferred not to do it alone. Small moves. The kind that don't look like anything from the outside but feel like everything from the inside. Marcus noticed on his second January visit. He didn't say so in words, but he shook my hand longer than the first time and watched his mother differently for the rest of the weekend. Not worried, just watching, recalculating. In February, Cora's water heater started failing. Cold water in the mornings, lukewarm by afternoon. I knew the signs. I told her it needed replacing before it went completely. She said she had been meaning to call someone. I said I knew a plumber who would do it right. We went back and forth about who would make the call and who would handle the cost, and she accused me of trying to take over, which was fair, and I said I wasn't, which was also fair. We argued about it for 10 minutes in her back hallway with the dying water heater making a clicking sound between us like a timer. Then she said, fine, you call, but I pay. Fair. And you tell him exactly what I want. Not what you think is the practical choice. What do you want? The unit with the 10-year warranty. Not the 8. That happens to also be the practical choice. She pointed one finger at me. Don't. The plumber came Wednesday. Cora had a dentist appointment she had scheduled months before and refused to move. So she left me with a handwritten list of questions to ask and installation requirements that were more detailed than anything I had ever received from an actual contractor. I followed every item on the list. When she came home, the new water heater was installed, the old one was hauled away, and I had a written answer for each question she had given me. She stood in the utility room looking at the new unit. Then she said, "You asked about the warranty card. You had it on the list. Most people skip the warranty card. You would have asked me about it the second you got home." She turned around. She was still in her coat. There was a faint smear of the red chapstick she always wore at the corner of her mouth. She looked at me with an expression I did not have a word for. And then she stepped forward and kissed me. It was not rushed. It was not desperate or dramatic. It felt like something she had already decided and was finally carrying out. Then she stepped back, folded her hands in front of her, and looked at the water heater like it was a particularly interesting piece of machinery. I didn't say anything clever. I didn't have anything clever. I just stood there with my pulse doing things that felt genuinely embarrassing for a man my age. "The warranty card is in the top drawer," I said finally. She covered her mouth and started laughing. "The real kind. The kind that fills a room." "Get out of my utility room," she said. I went to the kitchen. She followed. I made coffee and she sat at her own kitchen table in her own house and she looked at me the same way she had in the car in the snow. Except this time she didn't look away first. There is one more piece of this I have to tell you, because no honest story gets to skip what's hard. In March, Tom's brother Ray arrived. Not Marcus, Tom's brother Ray, who had not been to that house since the funeral and who came with a specific purpose that Cora told me about on the phone the evening before he showed up. He wanted Tom's workshop equipment. A lathe, a bandsaw, a drill press Tom had spent years collecting and keeping clean and sharp. Not because Ray needed any of it. Because he said it was what Tom would have wanted. Cora had left the workshop exactly as Tom had left it. She wasn't ready to change it. She had already told Ray no twice. Once in a letter and once on the phone. He came anyway. I was at my own house when she texted me. Just my name. Nothing else. Not a question. Just my name. I walked over. Ray was a bigger man than Tom had been. Older, louder, the kind of man who fills a room without noticing and then seems surprised when people feel pressed out of it. He looked at me when I came through the back door, and his expression asked what he didn't say out loud. "This is my neighbor," Cora said. "He knows the workshop." That wasn't entirely true. I had been in it twice. But I understood what she was doing and I stood beside her. Ray looked at me, then at Cora. "You don't need to bring anyone else into this." "I'm not," she said. "He's already in this." The conversation went on a long time. Ray was not a bad man. I want to say that clearly because it would be easy to make him the problem and he wasn't. He was grieving, and grief sometimes looks like grabbing onto whatever is left of someone. He wanted something of Tom's and didn't know how to ask for it without turning it into a fight. In the end, Cora offered him Tom's good hunting jacket and the fly rod from the wall of the garage. "Those had story," she said. "Those were the ones Tom himself would have picked." Ray left with the jacket and the rod. No equipment. When his truck pulled out, Cora sat down on the back porch step without saying anything. I sat beside her. The evening was cool, that first edge of real spring in the air, the kind that smells like something is about to change over. "Thank you for being here," she said. "I wasn't going anywhere." She leaned her head against my shoulder once. Just once. Then she straightened back and looked at the yard. "I'm still figuring out who I am without him," she said. "I know. That doesn't bother you?" I looked at the fence line between our two properties. The same fence I had driven past for 6 years without thinking about it once. "No," I said. "I'm still figuring out who I am without a version of my own life I didn't even know I needed to let go of. I think most people are in the middle of figuring something out. That's not a problem. It's just the condition." She didn't answer for a long time. "You think we're doing this right?" she said finally. I thought about a curtain rod, a warranty card, a kitchen table covered in sticky notes, a green notebook with real notes in it, her voice in a dark car in the snow telling me what a scar feels like when the cold comes. "I think we're doing it honest," I said. "That's the only version of right I know how to do." She picked up a dry leaf from the step and turned it over in her fingers, then set it down. "That'll do," she said. And sitting there on the back step with the fence between our 2 yards, the evening going dark and quiet around us. That was the first moment since the whole thing started that I didn't have a single thought about where it was going. I wasn't planning. I wasn't calculating. I was just there, completely there, next to a woman who had needed a neighbor and ended up with something harder to name than that. For a man who had spent a long time keeping his days full of functional and forgetting the rest, that turned out to be the whole thing. If you're watching this all the way through, drop something in the comments. Tell me whether you would have kept showing up, or whether you would have walked back to your own house and kept the fence between you. I think about that sometimes. What would have happened if I had put that curtain rod back in the wall and not sat down for coffee? How different a life is made by whether you stay an extra 40 minutes or don't. I stayed, and I'll take that.